Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
It's also been a pleasure working with Dennis, and thank you, Galveston Arts Center, for helping me organize the show and get it out to an audience. And all my colleagues at Clear Lake. I couldn't do a lot of this without my colleagues there and the university. Yeah, you're looking at a body of work that I've been working on since 2017. And it's an investigation of this really kind of fraught issue in Florida history called the Florida Barge Canal. I grew up in Florida. As an undergraduate, I studied Florida history and history of the New South and Old South. And I'd never heard of it until I accidentally drove over this really tall bridge in Florida in the middle of nowhere. And I saw the canal. So I got curious and I started investigating. But a long story short, the Florida Barge Canal was this kind of mammoth WPA project. Started in 1931 and 1933. And the idea was to connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Gulf for barge travel. So land starts being cleared, towns start being bought. This canal authority has a lot of power in Florida. At 25% completion, so a quarter of the project's done, land's been cleared, reservoirs have been built, rivers have been inundated, it's canceled. It's canceled because of the efforts of a professor at the University of Florida, Marjorie Harris Carr, and the kind of a local, academics and Central Florida farmers and a whole kind of collection of Floridians halt the canal. And President Richard Nixon actually cancels the canal, and it's defunded in the 1990s. So it's like this 80-year endeavor. The project's canceled because it would have salinated Florida's aquifer. But there's this 70, 80-year history that I find fascinating and kind of a parable, so to speak, of you can have a really big idea and a lot of power behind that idea. But all along the way, the Army Corps of Engineers and locals and farmers are always suspicious of this idea. And there's caution flags everywhere. The Corps of Engineers makes those clear, but it's like full steam ahead because it's already started, so it's going to move forward. As someone who grew up in Florida, it's a huge victory for like anyone that lives in Florida and likes a beautiful place because this canal has been canceled. The dynamic of the project that I also find interesting is there's efforts to totally erase the canal from the Florida landscape. That's tricky because some of these locations, some of these photographs, these are landscapes that are artificial, but they've been around for maybe 70, 80 years now. And some of these fishermen that you see photographed too families have histories of going there. So it's the last 4 governors in Florida, Jeb Bush, Charlie Crist, Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, have all been in favor of blowing the canals and things like that. But it hasn't happened because they're not really sure yet. There's going to be a cost to doing the right thing, so to speak, because it's going to sacrifice other landscapes in favor of the older ones. So yeah, some of the photographs are very direct. Some of them are a bit more ambiguous. If you have any questions at all while you're looking at the pictures, I'm happy to answer them. It started at about midway down the St. Johns River, and it was going to come out on Crystal Springs in the Gulf. And it was a patchwork of canals that were supposed to link existing bodies of water. And growing up in Florida, I didn't know, we don't have a lot of canals. We have natural bodies of water. So that's what I noticed first about the canal was it's like an arrow straight river. And so that kind of piqued my interest. Federally funded, it was a workers' progress. Yeah. The idea was that it would have been a national defense investment. And then when that idea didn't work, it became an economic way of transporting goods. And then trucking totally killed that idea because it became way more economic not to barge things, but to bring things on highway trucks. So, yeah. Locks, transport barges, of course, to my knowledge, but that lock, which is massive, will open for a bass boat. So you can go up in your bass boat and it'll open, and you'll see all the alligators and the manatees chilling in the water between the locks. But yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's to that point, nothing ever really has to be decided until it's kind of a catastrophe. Like it's on the end of, right now, the Kirkpatrick Dam, which some of these sites are photographs there, it needs to be maintained or it needs to be destroyed. And so budgets for millions or tens of millions of dollars to maintain a structure they're not sure they want. That's one reason that nothing's happened. Rodman Reservoir, which is one of the reservoirs that was made, was also like huge bass fishing in Florida. It was a nationally known bass fishing site. The reservoirs that were cleared, the land that was cleared for the reservoirs was, I mean, it takes the breath out of you when you see all the cypress trees that were just kind of roll tracked over and big steam engines doing it. But I think it's budget, and this comes down to really local politics and environmental activists who want to restore the natural flow, but there's money, and you need money to do that. And it's kind of a hot button issue because a lot of people use these newer landscapes for boating or recreation. Yeah, that's what I think is interesting. It's not always easy to do the right thing, whatever you think the right thing might be. If it's to restore the natural flow of the rivers that were inundated, it's going to come at a cost. I happened across the canal. I was just driving through Central Florida one night, and I was going up a really tall bridge in the middle of nowhere in Florida, which is weird. And then I saw the canal on the left and the right. And I'd never heard about it. And usually I stumble across research projects or photo projects by accident. And so after I finished graduate school, in Philly, I could get down to Florida more often. So I started photographing, really reading history books on the subject. I talked to a historian. I talked to a riverboat captain who gives tours along the Ocklawaha River, and it kind of started building from there. I kind of like information gather, and then I go out and I make pictures. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Margaret Burke-White, a photographer during a similar era, has these beautiful photographs of like kind of American progressivism at its height, like these huge public structures that were funded and brand new dams and things like that. My goal for some of the photographs was to make them very clear, because in one sense I have a direct kind of message. This is a thing that happened in a space and time and place. The other photographs, kind of the more ambiguous panel behind there, some of the motion blur in that photograph. I like, as an artist and as a photographer, contrasting direct issues in ambiguity. So like something that's very easy to understand, and then something that demands something of the viewer. And that's kind of how it kind of, to me, reflected the issue at hand. Was there's very clear answers, but to make some of the decisions, it's a little ambiguous on how you would go about doing the right thing. It's also kind of how I think about photography in general. Photography is really capable of showing you exactly what you need to see. It's very direct. It captures whatever's before the lens, but it's not reality. It's something different than reality. And so some of the pieces, like the water panel back there, the leaf with the blue crab underneath it, they're kind of more contemplative and reflective than they are direct. And so I like kind of having that ambiguity reflected in the project. It's a long time. It's unusual that someone would focus on an issue that long. I still feel like I could make, there's still pictures I want to make of the project. So what's good about working on a project like this is when I met Dennis, it forced my hand to make some creative decisions because I thought, okay, this is going to turn into an exhibition now. Before this exhibition, and I think I showed this to you, it was a photo book. So I kind of handmade an artist photo book that feels pretty different than this. So it's kind of something, it's a project, it's a photographic project that I like to kind of adapt to different forms, whether it's an exhibition or an artist book. I don't feel like it's done to me yet. There are still some people that I want to photograph for the project. And I love being out in the woods in Florida. Like I love being at some of these water sites. Some of these were mild trespassing on land that is maintained by the EPA. So yeah, I don't feel like I need to call it done. There's still some ideas. All of these are digital. Yeah, they're all digital. Some of them are photographs of objects that are analog. That photograph up there is a archival photograph. That's what all those notes are. And I photographed the photograph to include all the notes and the archival images. Totally, and it's still a live issue. They have to maintain these reservoirs so that nutrients level don't get too high, and maybe in the next 3 years the dam gets blown. So it's all these. Yeah, it's still worth kind of monitoring. Yeah.